So this is a little example of making a rock retaining wall. We've got two different layers of earth here. Over here we got tires for the retaining wall. And you can see over here how without the retaining wall, just kind of all the dirt kind of slumps together. So these rocks here are just stacked against the exposed dirt. You just kind of dig into it and cut it at a more steep angle. And then stack rocks up against it, and I just wet the rocks down with some water, and now I'm going to mix some mortar and then apply the mortar to the rocks, and just by throwing it on, and I'll check in and show you what it looks like after a batch of mortar. Alright, so I made a bit of mortar, and this is the basic process of how it goes. You just take it and throw it at the wall. Take a bit and throw it at the wall into the cracks. You don't need to do anything else. This is the first coat. Usually you start from the bottom and work your way up, because some rocks like these are loose and you don't want to disturb them until the mortar has a chance to cure. But that's the basic gist of it. Go around and throw mortar at all of the cracks, and then that's the first coat, and then that cures and keeps it in place, and then you go around and add a second coat later on. So I'll get to adding this, and then it'll just probably be one bag. We'll probably get a first coat on most of this, but once I finish the bag, I'll check in. So here we are after one bag of mortar. Most of the rocks are connected with some mortar, and we'll just leave that. And the whole face isn't fully covered with rocks, but having all of this in solid will help to add the final bit of rocks, and also keep it solid for when it gets smeared over with the third and fourth coats. It'll hold in place. A little bit of smearing maybe on the second, but that's how it's looking after one $7 bag of mortar mix. So it's the next day. This mortar has hardened a bit, and what I've done, I added a few more rocks, but on top. But for the most part, most of the rocks I add are these little rocks that are in the cracks to fill in all the little holes, so that the mortar has something to stick to. So after filling all of the remaining cracks, now I'm gonna get it wet, and I'll apply batch number 2, and then later on it'll get built up the rest of the way. So this is after the second bag of mortar. The first basically keeps it all in place, and the second really solidifies it. And the third is when basically starts smearing, but the second one was just thrown on. And then there's a couple areas where maybe if it's indented, it doesn't have to be flat, but structurally the strength is all on the outside. So if it's indented too much, like right here, it's indented a little bit, but you can just add other rocks onto it, like could do that. And then later, and I did that in a couple areas, just building out a little bit, and the next smeared layer will just cover it all over, and then it ends up with a solid mortar finish, which can be painted. But so this is the end of this section for today, and once this cures, then I'll build up the rock the rest of the way. The idea is to incorporate this rock wall into a cinder block wall on top, but that'll be for later. So it is now halfway through the third day, and just, you can see, stacked up the rest of the rocks that are right here to cover the rest of the exposed dirt. And as you can guess, the next step is to wet the rocks and apply mortar. Another project that was done yesterday is burying this drain pipe, which is coming out right there, up against the tire wall. And then I put a landscaping fabric underneath of it to make kind of like a big old gutter type thing. And then the gravel up against it, and I'll end up adding more gravel, but this will prevent the ice from accumulating right up against the tire wall in the wintertime. And it'll have some additions to it over time, but that's another kind of part of this whole project here. Okay, so after the third, it's the third day, and that's the third batch of mortar, and got coverage on most all of it. Used all the rocks in this section. And here's a little peek, what I mentioned before, how some of the holes are a little bit bigger. So like those holes, the mortar will just go right through if you throw it at it. So I have to find smaller rocks to plug all the holes that don't get filled, which become easier to see after the first batch of mortar. So those holes get plugged, and then tomorrow a second batch will cover it all up, and then all of it will be to 2 batches, and then the next one will be a smear coat, and then after 2 smeared batches it'll be pretty much a solid concrete retaining wall.